Hello, Steve White, Trek Boy 89 for Steve Arts 89. Well, I thought I was done talking about Section 31, but a couple little things happened. Rotten Tomatoes, the film was as low as, I think, 17% and then 23% initially, with audience 23 and critics 17, and then it leveled out to 2020. So somehow this film needs to be, given credit for unifying both critics and the audience in hating this film. And the other thing, I saw an article on trekmovie.com and I saw the title and I'm like, oh God. I tried to ignore it for about half a day and I'm like, no, I have to look at this. It says, interview Alex Kurtzman on how Section 31 embodies Star Trek values and the future of the franchise. So, okay, I started reading this and they did an interview with, I can't pronounce the guy's name, the director. I've done it at least once, but I can't do it. And him, but Alex did most of the talking. And maybe I should just read the whole thing because I'm just like, really? Okay. So they say it's been said that Section 31 is meant for a broader audience and it's a different flavour of Star Trek. So what core elements of Star Trek did you feel needed to be included with that mandate? He said, you and I have talked about this a lot. I think that you can't make Star Trek ultimately without reinforcing Gene Roddenberry's vision of a more optimistic future. And I don't have to tell you that there's been so much debate among fans about the notion of Section 31 since Deep Space Nine and what it represents. I don't think he's been successful in portraying Star Trek's optimistic future or maintaining that. But, okay, let's keep going. One of the things that we felt very strongly about is that if Star Trek is a mirror that holds itself up to the world and tells allegorical or metaphorical stories about how we live our lives, then you're in conversation about what it takes to protect that vision. It's not just a vision in Star Trek, it's actually a real world. So, yeah. If you're in the Federation or Starfleet, then you are forced by oath to live according to certain rules, to live within the Federation. We make a real point at the beginning of this movie of saying that the story takes place outside of the Federation space. But the people that we're about to see want the same things as a traditional Starfleet officer would want. These are just not the people who have it within themselves to wear a uniform on a starship in a traditional sense. Now, I didn't get this sense of these characters at all. I don't see them wanting to do anything good. They're there because they've been blackmailed and forced to be there, just like Giorgio was. I don't believe any of them there are just there for the good of it, for the honour of it. So I don't know where he gets this idea from. It says they're protecting the same thing, which is in order for Starfleet to be what it is, in order for that vision of Star Trek to be maintained, you need people operating in the shadows and in the grey areas of the Federation that the Federation Charter doesn't always allow for. And obviously that's a conversation that's happening in our world. And I'm like, no, sorry, no. We've gotten past all this in Star Trek's future. We don't have the grey areas. It's a bright, optimistic future. There's no grey, there's no shadows. It's nice and bright and happy and everything's great. It's the other races, the other civilizations that we have to deal with. There are no issues internally with Star Trek and Starfleet and the officers. That's why Gene had the rule of no internal conflict, which as soon as they changed rules like that, they started to erode what Star Trek was. But so yeah, he seems to think, obviously he's showing here he doesn't believe in the Star Trek universe, and that he just doesn't see a way to have it. He just can't believe in it, and there just has to be some questioning of it, some erosion of it. It just shows here that he can't believe in it. And he says, again, he keeps on going, he says, where the rubber meets the road, though, is in tone. If we made a very dark Star Trek, I think people would legitimately be able to say, wow, that doesn't feel like Star Trek, which everyone has said, because clearly he failed in this. But we really tried to mitigate against the conversation by, first of all, making something that was really fun, by putting in some deliberate and specific references. So there you go. Oh, he has some member berries. That'll keep the Star Trek fans happy. That's how little he thinks of us and how condescending he is. He thinks that's actually a solution. like Rachel Garrett being the most acute of those references to what it means to be the Federation and part of the Star Trek, and part of Star Trek and Starfleet, and ultimately to give you a funny, emotional story arc that, like Wagontrain to the Stars, is also hewing toward a Western paradigm. This is very much a redemption story of the character of Georgiou. I don't see any redemption for her here. Where? How? Maybe if she died at the end. There's no redemption here. It's just he's so detached from reality and Star Trek and what it is and what fans want and perceive. He just doesn't get it. And it's just interesting to see how that manifests in his perception and what he's saying about the show. It's just like, this show is not funny. It's not fun. The member berries are just insulting. They don't actually have any relevance. And it's just so stupid. Rachel Garrett, if the Federation can't deal with this problem because it's outside of the Federation, even though we actually see star bases inside of that space, why would you send someone Starfleet in? Why would you just send Starfleet in? It's like, it's just ridiculous. And these people, it's such a cynical thing to say, well, they wouldn't send their own people and they can't deal with it, so they're just going to find a bunch of losers who are not that smart and have no integrity. They're just there for their own interests, and they just end up dying anyway. It's just, there's nothing Star Trek about this story, nothing Star Trek about its themes, its tone, anything. There's just nothing Star Trek about this, and it's just fascinating, like I said, to see how he thinks about this and how he thinks what he thinks Star Trek is and how he thinks he's portraying it. And he doesn't even realise he doesn't believe in Star Trek. He doesn't get Star Trek. He still thinks it's just, yeah. I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. I knew this would be this bad. That's why I avoided reading it, because I'm like, I'm not going to be able to not have something to say about this. And I was just done with making videos about Section 31. But yeah, I just had to get into this. And then they do talk a little bit more about, could this be, potential to have, Star Trek films on different areas and different things and that. And of course they say, yes, sure, that would be good. And someone actually said, would this be a way to do legacy? I'm like, why can't they do a legacy series? If they can do a Starfleet Academy series and a stupid Rise of Reality sitcom thing, then they surely could just do an actual series. They wouldn't need to, it's supposed to be how Star Trek moves forward, with a post-Nemesis, post-Voyager series, post-Picard Season 3, but that third season was that. But to have that ongoing in a format that can continue, because the Picard Season 3 story was, a little small story, sort of ending Picard's, story and everything. So that's obviously not a future series, but having this new series with these new characters that they set up. So the idea, even him suggesting, oh yeah, maybe we'll just throw out a one-off film to shut the fans up, that was really insulting. And then they also go on to say, have you heard anything from Skydance? And he's like, no, they haven't contacted us, we haven't discussed it. But I know that one of the guys there is a huge Star Trek fan, we've worked with him before, so what? Star Trek's going to continue, yeah, but do you think you're going to after this? I mean, I hope this film is such a disaster. It's so poorly received, and I hope it's such a disaster that it actually wakes up the people behind the scenes to actually realise that Kurtzman is the wrong person to be in charge, to be running this ship, to be flying this ship, to be in charge of this franchise, because he's just so out of touch, he doesn't get it. I know that there are some Star Trek fans who don't really like Star Trek, who think this dark version of Star Trek with all the, conflict and everything is the best Star Trek because they relate to it, because it resembles today, but Star Trek is not supposed to resemble today. It comments on today, but it's not supposed to resemble or mirror or continue the problems that we have today in Starfleet and in Star Trek. So it's just maddening when you see people think that. I know he's one of those people that he doesn't really get Star Trek, but the only part he gets is sort of the Deep Space Nine take on it, which is a cynical idea that, anyone who actually likes this stuff is just naive and stupid, and they don't realise they're not adults. In the adult world, you have to have people doing the wrong thing, and that's just justifying immorality. And that's what we find in current day politics and that, and people making excuses for certain people for what they do, and certain presidents for it's just it's just sickening to see people do that, because you grow up and people do make excuses and justifications of things that, you know, are really very simple and there's really no grey. And to see that this is the sort of his idea of Star Trek, and that's why he has such a hard time producing anything that resembles Star Trek, because at best he sees it as Deep Space Nine, which is the worst of Star Trek because it was so un-Star Trek. It was designed as the anti-Star Trek. And then for him to sort of try and do something beyond that is why he's so far from creating or doing anything that resembles Star Trek. So